My name is Jessica. I live with my mother and my little sister. As for my father, he is a crazy man obsessed with knowledge of the supernatural, necromancy, and telepathy. His obsession ruined our lives. Because of the things he has gotten himself into, he constantly goes crazy and gets into very nervous and violent moods. He used to beat us and destroy parts of the house for no reason. We lived in terror and torment for years. Every day I woke up to my mom and dad fighting in loud voices. Mom screamed and called for help because he would hit her, because she would ask him to leave this craziness and go back to work and spend time with us. We're not able to pay the rent, nor even be educated. We didn't even have food to eat or drink like everybody else had. My mother was afraid to go to work and leave us alone with him because she feared he would go crazy and hurt us. Other crazy people would come to him and ask him to do magic or summon demons, and they would give him money for it. We were living in agony and hunger, and my little sister fell ill due to malnutrition, and we could not even treat her. Then one day we woke up and found out our father was collecting all his things, his clothes, his tools, and his books about ghosts and goblins. His incense, precious stones, and all sorts of other things. He collected them all in his bag and walked out. Mom asked him, "Where are you going?" He gave her a closed envelope and told her to let Jessica read it. She asked him what was in the envelope, and he said firmly that it was not her business, but to give the envelope to Jessica, just not right now. She asked, "When?" He said, "You will know when the time comes." He warned her and said that if you open the envelope or neglect it, our daughter will die. Mom threw away the envelope because, as usual, she didn't take his word seriously. But in the end, because she is a caring mother, she thought that if there was even a slight chance that his threat was true, she had better keep the envelope. So she didn't open it, and she didn't throw it away. 2 years went by. Without my dad around, our situation, it got a little better. My mom was able to go to work, and my sister's health started to improve. What we weren't ready for, though, was my mom's sudden illness. It was severe and expensive treatment was needed, and we couldn't afford it. I thought about going to work myself, but there was no way I could make enough money to pay for the expensive treatment that my mom needed. Then one day, a woman in her 40s came to us. She had very luxurious clothes on, and you could tell that she was very wealthy. She eagerly asked about my father, and I told her he hadn't been here in 2 years. She cried and begged me to show her where he was. She said she was in desperate need of him and would pay any amount of money to find him. When she said that, my eyes almost popped out of my head. I told her we needed $100,000. I couldn't believe it when she said she would give me $200,000. I couldn't believe what she had said. I was so curious to know why someone like her would pay such a giant amount of money for someone like my father. What could she possibly gain from him? I asked her about why she wanted to see my father and what problems she was having that she needed him to solve. She told me that her husband wanted to leave her for another woman. She was still in love with her husband, and she wouldn't be able to live without him. She also shared about her deep hurt and injustice she was feeling from it all. I, too, was pained by the injustice of the world. But pain was that someone could pay this kind of money for a simple issue like losing their spouse, when my mother is dying and I can't afford to save her. Before I knew it, I was telling this woman that I could use magic to make her husband love her instead of this other woman. I told her that I'd gained this knowledge from my father, and with his authority, I could do it for her. She was thrilled and paid me half of the amount in advance. I took the $100,000, but the strangest thing happened. I hadn't done any magic to help this woman, and yet she returned back to me with the other half of the money and told me that the magic had worked. Her husband was in love with her again, and not the other woman. She said that I was brilliant, and I must be some sort of wizard. The important thing is that within a matter of 3 days, I had $200,000. I got my mother the treatment that she needed, and I decided that this was something I could get used to. My mother and my sister did not object, as we had all felt oppressed by my father, and this was an opportunity that we should take advantage of. A little encouragement. The woman whose marriage I fixed bought me her friends, and I fooled them all too. I was so good that within 6 months, I had made $1 million. When I realized how much money I was able to make with this magic, I was shocked and angry at how much money my father must have been making while he deprived us all of the things that we needed. Why would he have done this to us and made our lives so difficult? I couldn't figure it out. One night, I had a strange dream. In the dream, I saw my father, and he was in a very deep well. He was trying to get out, but he couldn't. He would climb to the top of the well, and every time he reached the top, he would fall back in again. And each time this happened, he would call out my name, "Jessica, save me! Jessica, save me!" I woke up and told my mother about the dream. It was that moment that she remembered the envelope that my father had given her to give to me when the time came. We looked all over for the envelope, and we finally found it. We opened it up and found that there was a page with a title on it, as well as a key written on the page, like a game. Below it said, "Save me." I remembered the dream and thought for a minute I was going to save my father. My mother warned me not to go. I also knew that I didn't have any intentions of taking any risks to go and find him. Besides, who knew what kind of danger he was in? There was a good chance I would end up in the same danger along with him. 2 days went by, and each night I had the same dream. And each night, his voice got louder and louder, and his cries for help got stronger and stronger. Until one day, my mother, my sister, and I all woke up to the sound of banging on the door of our house. It was so loud, it sounded like someone was breaking down the door. We ran to open the door, and it was all the women who had been paying me for the magic that I had not been doing. everything. They said that I'd been lying to them. They began pulling my hair and calling me a cheater and a thief. They wanted their money back. My mother and sister were defending me and trying to stop them until we found out that all of their husbands had left them for other women. They had found me out, and there was nothing we could do but give them their money back. The problem was, we'd spent almost the entire $200,000 that they'd given us on treatments for my mom. Even so, I promised them that I would get the money ready and have it with them within the next 2 days and give it back to them. I had no idea how I was going to do that, but it was enough to get them to leave, thank God. We didn't know what to do to get out of this predicament. It was impossible for me to save those ladies in 2 years. There was no way I was going to be able to do it in 2 days. The only option I had left was for me to go to the address that was on the key in the envelope and to try and find my father. If I could make $1 million in 6 months, he would have been able to make much more than that working in this field his entire life. I needed the money badly, so I had to try meet him. I took my bag on my back and left before anyone woke up. I left a note for my mother to let her know that I was sorry. I promised her that I would find a solution to our problems. I went on and found my way to the address. It was a house. In fact, it was more like a mansion, but this mansion was scary. It was dark and gloomy, and the gate had a statue carved in the shape of a skull. My heart sank when I saw it, but I reminded myself that my mother and my sister needed me to keep going, so I mustered the courage I needed and I kept going. I decided to enter into the house, but I was barely dragging my legs due to fear I was feeling. By the time I reached the gate, I saw that there was a skull talking to me. It asked who the visitor was. I froze with fear and ran back. As I did, I yelled, "I am Jessica." The skull said back to me, "Do you have the key?" At that moment, I remembered the key my father had left in the envelope with the letter and told him, yes. And he told me to open it with the key. I asked him, "Where is it?" "I don't see a place for the key." He told me to reach inside the nostrils of a skull, and there I would find the place for the key. I was disgusted and afraid, but I put my hand into the nostrils and found the place. I put the key in and opened it. The gate opened and I heard him say, "Welcome to the city of Abu Zabal." As soon as I entered the door, it closed behind me and I looked back at the skull. There was an electric wire, so I understood that it was just a machine skull shaped and programmed. The mansion was strange. Every corner of it was in one of 2 colors, either red or black. The curtains were red, and even the carpets were all red. Then someone said to me in a sharp tone, "Who are you, and how did you enter here?" I was terrified and told him in a trembling voice, "My name is Jessica. My father is Mark, and he is the one who gave me the address and the key." He replied in an angry tone, "Mark Charlie?" "Yes," I said. As soon as I told the voice that Mark Charlie was my dad, it was as though he had thought I had cursed him and all of his family. He grabbed me by my clothes and pulled me into a cold, dark room. I tried to resist, but it was useless. He locked me in the room and left me there. I was so afraid. I kept crying and calling for my mother to come and save me. I felt so sorry and stupid for having come here and wished I could go back home to my mother and sister. Suddenly, I heard a strange sound of me inside of the room. I screamed and kept moving away. It was a sound of another person. Only they seemed to be heard. Trembling, I said, "Who are you?" And as soon as I said that, I saw the man. I got closer to his face and I realized it was my father. He was in very bad condition. His clothes were tattered and in pieces. His beard and his hair had gotten very long. He was covered in bruises from being beaten. He said to me, "I was teleporting you, and finally you heard me." I asked him who brought him here and what had happened to him. He said to me, "Listen, my daughter, these people are very dangerous and have no mercy. I came here because I knew that they were very spiritual. I thought that I could join them. Turns out that they know the secrets of the universe, but they are criminals and demon worshippers. They imprisoned me here because they wanted me to guide them to the place of my wealth, which I built all my life out of my toil." Angrily, I told him, "Give it to them and save yourself." He said, "No way am I giving these criminals my life savings, Jessica. You have to save us." I was very angry at him and said, "And what am I supposed to do? You're the one who has gotten us all into grave danger, and now you must do something to save us. Do you understand?" After I said these things, he proceeded to tell me where he had hidden the money and told me to run to the police as soon as I got out. I asked him to come with me, but he responded and said the secret door can only be opened by female energy and not male energy. I asked him what door he was talking about, and he took me with him and stood me in front of one of the walls in the room. He pulled out a piece of chalk that he'd been carrying and drew a door on the wall. He looked at me in all seriousness and told me to pass through it. Then he said, as you pass, you have to say, "Efta Yesemsem." I felt a fire burning inside of me. I couldn't believe that this was his plan. He asked me to trust him, that if I closed my eyes and completely leave myself, it could be done. I didn't understand, so he became angry and began shouting at me to pass through the door. I cried and of course hit my head on the wall. He got angry with me and said, "I told you to leave yourself. Just breathe. Come back and try it. Make sure you say Efta Yesemsem." He was losing his temper, so I tried to do what he was asking me to do. I kept saying Efta Yesemsem and trying this madness, but it wasn't working. thinking. I knew that he was crazy, so that's not what surprised me. The thing that surprised me was my own stupidity. What was I thinking coming here? When I wasn't able to pass through the door in the wall, he began losing his temper. He acted as if it was my responsibility. It was somehow my fault that I couldn't do it. He got crazy again and began shouting and hitting the ground. I was afraid, cold, terrified, and totally broken. As he was doing that, I tried to surrender and hug myself. All of a sudden, my tears stopped. I curled up on the floor to try to sleep. I found myself praying to the Lord. I said, Lord, I'm not a religious person, but I have no other hope. If you're there, if you're real, I could really use your help. At that moment, a strange man who had imprisoned us entered and kept saying strange words and moving around strangely. He would move his head around and then got down on all fours and pressed his ear to the ground, as if he was trying to listen to something underground. He then started sniffing at me and looking at me. I tightened my hand. The man looked at me and said, Your father told you the location of the money. You need to guide us to it. Of course, my father was useless and still in his stupor and only semi-conscious. The man looked at me again and said, If you don't tell me where it is, your fate will be worse than him. He pulled me up and took me out. As we left the room, I saw a group of men dressed in strange clothes who were talking around me and counting and chanting. They were banging on drums. I felt like I was surrounded by crazy people, so I began to scream. I told them that I would tell them about the place where the money is. It was the only way I could save myself. We walked outside where I would begin to tell them where the money was. But what happened next was a miracle. When we walked out of the mansion, it was surrounded by police cars. The man told me not to say a word to them because they still had my father. That didn't matter to me, though. I knew that this help had come from God. We were watching the police cars, and before I opened my mouth to say anything, I saw my mother jump out of one of the police cars screaming, Jessica, my daughter! The crazy man ran away, and I ran to my mother. I knew she was the one who called the police and found the place because the address had been on the letter in the envelope that we had read together. She knew when she woke up and I wasn't there, it's where I must have gone. The police ran after the men and arrested them. They went into the mansion and met my father. They took him and admitted him into an insane asylum. As for me, I decided not to mention the money to the police. I wasn't even certain that if I went to the place where he had said the money was, that it would even be there. After all, my father had been delusional for most of my life, but we decided it would be silly not to check. So we went to the place where he had told me, and wouldn't you know it, he had stashed away more money than I had ever seen. There was more than $100 million hidden away. So after we made sure my mother was taken care of with all of her medical expenses, we used the money to travel around the world and start a completely new life.